But here's what most men don't realize. If you're waking up tired, your desire feels muted, your hands and feet are cold, and something just feels off in your body, it's easy to blame age and move on quietly. I'm a board-certified urologist, and I've seen this pattern thousands of times in men just like you, and I want you to know this isn't a personal failure. There's one small misunderstood habit involving cloves that most men get completely wrong. Tell me where you're watching from. And if this matters to you, gently like and subscribe, because what I'm about to share may surprise you. But here's what most people don't realize. The drop in desire you may feel after 50 doesn't start in the mind, and it doesn't even start with testosterone the way most men are told. It starts quietly, deep inside the blood vessels, in a place you can't feel and were never taught to think about. I see this every week in my practice. Men come in frustrated, confused, sometimes embarrassed, assuming their body is simply wearing out. And the first thing I tell them is this: what you're experiencing is not weakness, it's physiology. As we age, two major systems begin to change at the same time, and they're often confused with each other. Hormones do shift, yes, but far more important is what happens to the arteries that deliver blood to the pelvic region. Over decades, those vessels become less flexible, they don't open as easily, they don't respond as quickly, and the tiny blood vessels, the microcirculation that feeds erectile tissue, nerves and muscles, becomes sluggish. When blood flow declines, desire almost always follows, not because you don't want intimacy, but because your body doesn't feel ready for it. One of the most overlooked players here is nitric oxide. I explain this to my patients in very simple terms. Nitric oxide is the signal your body uses to tell blood vessels to relax and open. When you're younger, your body produces it easily. After 50, that signal weakens. Less nitric oxide means less blood reaching where it needs to go, when it needs to go there. Erections may feel softer. They may fade faster. You may notice less warmth in the groin, colder hands and feet, or a general sense that your energy doesn't turn on the way it used to. These are not character flaws. They are signs of reduced circulation. This is also why so many men are disappointed by medications alone. Pills can force a temporary response, but they don't rebuild healthy blood flow. They don't nourish the vessels. They don't restore communication between the brain, nerves, and blood supply. Many men tell me, "Doctor, it works sometimes, but I don't feel like myself." That's because the root problem was never addressed. You can't force vitality long term. You have to support the system that creates it. What's important to understand is that circulation and hormones are partners, not competitors. Good blood flow supports hormone delivery. It supports nerve sensitivity. It supports confidence because your body feels responsive again. When circulation is poor, even normal testosterone levels may not translate into strong desire or performance. That's why two men with the same lab numbers can feel completely different in their bodies. One has healthy vessels, the other doesn't. This is where history actually gives us a clue modern medicine often ignores. Long before prescriptions existed, cultures paid close attention to circulation. Certain spices were valued not for flavor, but for their warming, vessel-supporting properties. Cloves were one of them. They were used sparingly, intentionally, often in specific rituals or times of day, because people understood something we've forgotten. Blood flow is not constant. It follows rhythms. Timing matters. I'm not saying cloves are a miracle, and I'm certainly not suggesting shortcuts. What I am saying is that the reason cloves have endured for centuries is because they gently support circulation at the micro level, the level medications often miss. They work with the body's signaling systems, not against them. But here's the part most men never hear. Used incorrectly, they do almost nothing. Used at the wrong time, they can actually blunt the effect you're hoping for. And that's where the real misunderstanding begins, because once you understand when and how blood flow naturally rises and falls in your body, you start to see why so many men try the right thing in the wrong way. In the next part, I want to show you what's actually inside cloves that affects circulation and why using them casually or copying advice online often blocks the very benefit you're trying to unlock. But here's what most men don't realize. Not all natural boosters work the same way, and most of them fail for one simple reason. They try to stimulate instead of restore. I see this mistake constantly. Men take something that promises quick results, feel a brief surge, and then end up feeling more depleted than before. Cloves are different, and the reason has nothing to do with hype and everything to do with how the body actually reopens blood flow as we age. Inside cloves is a compound called eugenol. I want to keep this simple because the science doesn't need to be complicated to be powerful. Eugenol helps blood vessels relax, it doesn't force them open, and it doesn't whip the nervous system into overdrive. Think of it as helping a stiff door move smoothly again, rather than kicking it in. When vessels relax naturally, blood moves more freely, especially through the small, fragile pathways that matter most for erections, warmth, and sensitivity. This distinction is critical, especially after 60. Younger men can sometimes get away with stimulation because their vessels are still flexible. Older vessels don't respond well to pressure, they respond to signaling. Eugenol supports the same nitric oxide pathways your body already uses, encouraging vessels to respond the way they were designed to. That's why cloves feel subtle at first. They don't announce themselves. They quietly improve communication between your nerves and your circulation. Many men tell me they're skeptical. They say, "Doctor, I've tried herbs before and nothing happened." And I understand that hesitation. Most supplements lump everything together as if the body were a machine you can jumpstart. But the male circulatory system after 50 is more like an aging orchestra. If one section is off, blasting the volume doesn't fix the music. You need harmony, you need timing, you need synergy. Cloves don't work in isolation, they support a chain reaction. When blood vessels relax, nitric oxide becomes more effective. When nitric oxide works better, blood reaches erectile tissue more consistently. When that happens, the body regains confidence. Desire often returns not as urgency, but as readiness. Men notice warmth first, then stamina, then a quiet sense that their body is responding again without effort. That's how restoration actually feels. This is also why cloves matter more with age, not less. After 60, the goal is not to push harder. It's to remove resistance. It's to reduce the friction inside the vessels that blocks flow. Eugenol helps with that, but only when used correctly. Used casually, it's just another spice. Used thoughtfully, it supports the system that drives male vitality at its foundation. Now, I need to be very clear about something because this is where many men unknowingly sabotage themselves. More is not better. Eugenol works within a narrow window. Too little does nothing. Too much can actually dull the response, irritate the system, or interfere with the body's own signaling. I've seen men increase doses thinking they're accelerating progress, only to stall it completely. This is where skepticism should turn into caution, not dismissal. The problem is rarely that cloves don't work. The problem is that they're used without respect for dosage, rhythm, and the body's limits. And that brings us to the biggest mistake I see men make when they try to use cloves for circulation and libido, a mistake that quietly cancels the very benefit they're hoping for. Now here's the mistake most seniors make, and I want you to hear this as a warning, not a pitch. The biggest problem I see with cloves isn't that men doubt them, it's that they use them in ways that quietly work against their own bodies. And because the effects are subtle, they don't realize they're blocking the benefit until they give up entirely. My job as a physician is to protect you from that kind of silent setback. The first issue is form. Raw cloves, cooked cloves, and infused cloves behave very differently in the body. Chewing raw cloves may sound natural, but for many men over 50, it's too harsh. It can irritate the stomach lining, spike sensitivity, and trigger a stress response that tightens blood vessels instead of relaxing them. Cooked cloves, on the other hand, often lose much of the delicate compound we talked about earlier. High heat breaks it down. What's left is flavor, not function. This is why men tell me, "Doctor, I tried it in food and nothing happened. The preparation didn't match the goal." Then there's timing, and this is where things really go wrong. Many men assume that anything related to libido should be taken at night. That feels intuitive, but physiologically, it's often backward. At night, your body is shifting into rest mode. Blood pressure drops, digestion slows. Taking cloves late in the evening can interfere with sleep, blunt their circulatory effect, or simply get lost in a system that's winding down. I've seen men unknowingly disrupt their sleep and then blame the cloves, when the real issue was timing. Morning use is different. Earlier in the day, your circulatory system is naturally more responsive. Your nitric oxide signaling is more active. That's when gentle support makes sense. But again, most men aren't told this. They guess. And guessing with your health after 60 rarely ends well. Another overlooked issue is interaction. Coffee is a big one. Caffeine constricts blood vessels in some people, especially as we age. Taking cloves alongside coffee can cancel out their relaxing effect. Certain medications can also compete for the same pathways, not dangerously in most cases, but enough to reduce effectiveness, and sleep matters more than men think. Poor sleep alone can override any circulatory support, no matter how well chosen. Then there's the intensity trap. Men are conditioned to believe that if a little is good, more must be better. With cloves, this mindset backfires. Using them sporadically or in bursts confuses the body. Circulation improves through consistency, not force. Small, regular signals teach vessels how to respond again. Intense, irregular use just creates noise. I tell my patients this all the time. Your body learns through repetition, not pressure. Digestive sensitivity is another quiet factor, especially after 60. The gut becomes more reactive with age. If cloves irritate digestion, the body shifts into defense mode. Blood is pulled away from the periphery. That's the opposite of what you want. This doesn't mean cloves aren't right for you. It means the method matters. Gentle delivery protects both the stomach and the circulatory response. I want to be very clear here. None of these mistakes mean you failed. They mean you weren't given the full picture. Most men were never taught that timing, preparation, and consistency determine whether something supports vitality or quietly works against it. When you respect those principles, the body responds differently, more calmly, more reliably. In the next part, I'm going to walk you through the simple daily approach I recommend to my patients, the one that's easiest to tolerate, safest to sustain, and most aligned with how the male body actually restores blood flow after 60. But here's what most people never get to hear from a doctor. When I talk to my patients over 60 about cloves, I'm not giving internet advice or chasing trends. I'm giving guidance rooted in safety, patience, and respect for a body that's earned care, not punishment. At this stage of life, the goal is not to shock the system. It's to remind it how to respond again, calmly and reliably. The first thing I emphasize is gentleness. Whatever form cloves are used in, the preparation must protect the stomach and allow slow absorption. Harsh methods create resistance. Gentle methods invite cooperation. I tell my patients that if they feel burning, irritation or discomfort, that's the body saying, "This isn't the right approach." Progress should feel subtle, almost boring at first. That's a good sign. Restoration rarely announces itself loudly. Frequency matters more than intensity. I encourage regular, modest use rather than occasional bursts. Think of it as physical therapy for blood vessels. You wouldn't expect one intense session to rebuild strength. The body needs repeated, predictable signals. Over time, those signals teach vessels to relax more easily, nerves to respond more clearly, and energy to flow with less effort. Patience here is not passive. It's strategic. Duration is another piece men often misunderstand. This is not something you try for 3 days and judge. Circulatory adaptation takes weeks. I tell my patients to watch for early, non-sexual signs, warmer hands and feet, a steadier energy level through the day, improve sleep quality, falling asleep faster, or waking less at night. These are signs the nervous system and circulation are calming and synchronizing. Libido often follows later, naturally, without being chased. I also make it clear when to pause or reassess. If digestion becomes uncomfortable, if sleep worsens, or if there's no change after a reasonable period, it's time to adjust. Sometimes the timing is off. Sometimes another factor, like stress or medication, needs attention first. This is not failure, it's feedback. The body communicates in signals, not judgments. One thing I never allow my patients to believe is that cloves replace medical care. They don't. They support it. They complement healthy habits, proper evaluation, and honest conversations with a physician. If there's underlying vascular disease, hormonal imbalance, or metabolic issues, those deserve attention. Natural support works best when it's part of a bigger picture, not a substitute for it. What I've seen again and again is that when men approach this with dignity instead of desperation, their bodies respond differently. There's less tension, less performance pressure, more trust in the process. And trust is powerful physiology. It allows the nervous system to relax, which allows circulation to improve. This is the point where mechanics turn into meaning. It stops being about cloves and starts being about your relationship with your body. So I want to leave you with a question that matters more than any protocol. What if it's not too late for your body to respond, not because you forced it, but because you finally listened to it? Now here's what I want you to hear clearly, and I say this as a doctor who has sat across from men in quiet exam rooms for decades. Many of you have been carrying this silently. The frustration, the confusion, the private worry that something fundamental has been lost. Men don't talk about this easily. Instead, they adapt, they withdraw a little, they lower expectations. They tell themselves, this is just how it is now. And I want you to know how common that silence is and how unnecessary it can be. What you're experiencing was never a personal failure. It was an adaptation. Your body responding to changes it was never guided through properly. When circulation slows, when energy dips, when desire softens, the body isn't giving up. It's conserving, it's protecting. And the tragedy is that many men interpret that as decline, when in reality it's a system waiting for the right support to re-engage. I've seen this shift happen more times than I can count. One patient comes to mind, a man in his late 60s, quiet, thoughtful. He didn't complain loudly. He simply said, I don't feel like myself anymore. We didn't chase miracles. We didn't force anything. We focused on restoring basic signals, circulation, sleep, and trust in his body. Weeks later, he told me something that stuck with me. He said, I'm not trying so hard anymore. Things are just working better. That's what restoration looks like. Not bravado, not performance, readiness, presence, calm confidence. Masculine dignity doesn't come from pushing through pain or pretending nothing matters. It comes from taking responsibility for your health with patience and self-respect, from understanding that strength after 60 looks different than it did at 30, but it's no less real. In many ways, it's deeper, quieter, more sustainable. I want to bring us back to something I hinted at earlier. Cloves were never the point. They were the doorway. The real issue was that most men were never taught how to work with their body's timing, signals, and limits. Once that understanding clicks, the fear begins to loosen. Hope doesn't feel naive anymore. It feels earned. You're not late, you're not broken, and you're certainly not alone. What comes next isn't about chasing youth. It's about reclaiming function, confidence, and connection in a way that fits who you are now. And before we close this conversation, I want to invite you into something bigger than just information. A place where men support each other, learn together, and stop carrying this alone. If you found value in this conversation, I want to invite you to join a community built specifically for men like you, not for clicks, not for trends, but for steady, trustworthy guidance you can return to again and again. When you subscribe, you're choosing consistency over noise, understanding over urgency, and long-term health over quick fixes. This channel exists so you don't have to navigate these changes alone. You deserve energy that lasts through the day, confidence that feels natural, and deep, restorative sleep that allows your body to repair itself. Your health matters, not just to you, but to the people who rely on you, who look to you, who feel the difference when you're present and well. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's responsible. I want to close the loop we opened at the beginning. The reason so many men are disappointed by cloves and by so many other solutions is because they try to force the body to perform. Cloves don't work that way. They don't push. They restore communication. They help blood vessels listen again. They support the signals your body already knows how to use when they're respected and timed correctly. That principle applies far beyond this one topic. When you work with your body instead of against it, things begin to change quietly but meaningfully. And that's what we focus on here. So if this approach resonates with you, stay with us, subscribe, be part of this conversation, because your health is worth protecting, your confidence is worth restoring, and it's never too late to support your body with clarity, patience, and dignity.